Residential and commercial real estate are two different types of investments and two different types of real estate. I'm going to show you the tips, the secrets, and all of the facts from years of doing this business as to how it is you'll be able to not only determine the differences, but how to strategize in maximizing the amount of cash flow you can make and saving yourself a lot of time in terms of regular residential real estate and getting into a world that you've never seen before, which is commercial real estate. So we're going to start with the differences between residential and commercial real estate. Number one, residential real estate is going to be one house structured in a way where the demand is based on your home buyer that wants to live there and makes an emotional decision to purchase that home one time. So it's a one-time transaction, and it's one that's done where you as an investor can only make money based on that 1-year lease and increasing each year. Contrasting that to commercial real estate, you have any asset class that includes income, development, self-storage, businesses that are all encompassed into being as creative as you possibly want to be and work with tenants that are much more qualified to pay you every month the income you're looking to see to create wealth. So for example, one house would be a one deal in which you're funding based on a normal lender that would bring in money from a qualified, or let's call it unqualified, buyer. There's a lot more buyers out there in residential real estate that aren't qualified, unfortunately. On the commercial real estate side, most of the clients you deal with are very serious, seasoned investors that have cash or will use leverage from a bank. So you know the seriousness of who you're dealing with, and the demand of who you'll deal with on the exit or your buyer is someone who's much more serious to do a deal with you, which is going to save yourself time. It's going to make you a lot more money at the end of the day. Some other differences would be the investment position. So when you first buy a piece of raw land in commercial real estate, you can develop that. You can put a McDonald's, a Dunkin' Donuts into it. You can resell that. You can lease it. There's so many different vehicles that you can create wealth in commercial real estate versus one pot on what it would be for residential real estate, that it just opens up many more opportunities for you as an investor. And then you can scale those opportunities into larger properties, mixed asset types, and really get into an area of portfolio for yourself to create residual income, cash flow every month, and basically legacy wealth if you leave that behind for, let's say, your family or however you want to do that in the future. So you may be asking yourself the question on money between residential real estate and commercial real estate. The differences are what I call a lot of work and a little money, which is residential real estate, or a lot of work and a lot of money, which is commercial real estate. To give you an example, when you do a residential lease transaction, or let's call it a sale transaction, we'll go up to a sale. Let's call it a $300,000 sale, and the amount of work you're going to do as a residential agent is going to be one where you're taking clients, you're driving them to properties, you're wasting a lot of time, and typically, if you don't vet the buyers you deal with, you're spinning a lot of wheels to figure out, once you go under contract, that buyer getting further into the deal is not approved from his lender. So at that point, now you've gone 30, 60, 90 days of no money, wasting time, and you have to start from scratch. That process could take 4 months, maybe even 6 months to sell one house. At the end of the day, when you sell that house, now you're having to split commission, and the amount of money you'll typically make there is, let's call it 6% commission on a $300,000 house, and you split that money with the house. So your take-home money is not as much as it would be in commercial real estate. To give you an example, on a lease, if you do a lease deal in our business in commercial real estate, a $5,000 lease and just a 5-year lease, you're going to walk home in your pocket as an agent with $9,000. In residential real estate, you're only taking half of whatever that month rent is in commission, and you're splitting that typically with the brokerage you're with. So it's a very small amount of money in contrast. Again, the workload between the two is different. Residential, you have a lot of time wasting and little money. Commercial real estate, the money that you make is much more plentiful based on the work and the effort you put in. So you might as well deal in an industry that you're going to make all the money. The other thing is that there's not as much competition in that industry. But what's more important is to understand that when you're doing business in commercial real estate, the amount of money typically you're going to make is 3, 4, and sometimes 5x on some of the deals that we do, especially if it's a national tenant lease or selling something that's, let's call it $5 million or above. So those are some of the money differences. And then you also have the ability in commercial real estate to make residual money. You make money on the leasing, you make money on the sale, You can resell buildings in our business versus residential. It's a one-off deal. It's done one time. It's one sales transaction or one lease transaction, and that's it. So big difference between the two. And for those who do want to learn about commercial real estate, it's much more profitable for you in the commercial real estate sector.
Now I want you to just like take a quick minute on an example of kind of why you have more control on the money that you make. Kind of like what you were talking about, you being able to step into a business. It was one of the videos that we made together, and I kind of watched and thought that was pretty cool. Is you stepped into that plaza, right? You stepped into that plaza, you rose the rent on those tenants, and then you were able to bring up that value for the next buyer, right? You can't do that much with residential. Right?
That's correct.
Maybe you can flip the house.
Yeah.
You're not making an extra however much you can put on that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can add another $500 to $1,000 in rent. With a commercial property, you're adding an extra $1,000 per building, right? Whatever, however much you raised it. So go on kind of the control aspect that you have on those properties and lending them and stuff.
Perfect. Okay.
Just a quick minute.
Okay. So in relation to the control differences between residential and commercial real estate, big difference. So in a residential deal, again, you can only sell that property for what the current cost per square foot is. A comparable sale is going to dictate what is that property really worth. And that's it. You know, if you were to add a pool, add a new roof, add other improvements, maybe slight amounts that the appraiser is going to give you credit for, but nowhere near what you can do in commercial real estate in terms of adding value on your own and taking a deal from a cost per square foot basis to then allowing it to be sold from an income standpoint, which would be under an income analysis approach. So what you do is a building that, let's say, as an example, I'll tell you a deal I did. It was the owner wanted $1.3 million. The building on a good day of cost per square foot was only worth right around $890,000. I told him what you could do is we'll lease up that building, bring up the rents that currently are underperforming, lower month-to-month tenants not paying full market rent. You raise up all the rents, and by raising up the rents, you're creating value to that transaction that's going to put money in your pocket. So now I took that building, leased it all up, brought it up to current market rents, and we ended up selling it for right at $1.3 million. So $1.3 million, and we did that over the course of 2 to 3 months. It was 3 months total. So by allowing yourself the ability to increase and add value in commercial real estate, you're essentially creating money. And it's not just on a plaza that you lease up and sell for a higher cap rate. We do it on development property. You buy the land, you rezone that land, and those entitlements now go from, let's call it agricultural type of cow pasture property that's worth, let's say, 800 grand. When you entitle that to have homes or a different zoning, you've now created value again in commercial real estate to then sell it to a home builder that wants to buy it from you. That $800,000 piece of land wants to buy it for $1.5 million from you, and only the time period that it took to entitle that property through the county and planning and zoning. So there's so many different avenues that you can increase value on your own, and the creativity in regards to how you can do that commercial real estate is really endless. And the more deals you do, the more you start to learn more, and the more creative you can be to start to increase value. Land lease deals that allow you to make money just off the land, and then you resell that to institutional buyers up in New York and Wall Street guys. So there's so much you can do, much more so than residential real estate, and it's almost limitless in terms of what you can do in commercial real estate. The next is going to be scalability. So with residential real estate, scalability is very difficult because, again, you may have one house or you may have multiple houses, and to manage those multiple houses is something that can be a challenge, not only with your time, with tenants that don't pay on time that might damage the property, but also to be able to manage a multiple portfolio of residential properties that are scattered over either a city or multiple cities. So there's a lot of chaos involved when you have residential real estate and managing that on just a one type of asset scenario. Contrasting that to commercial real estate, I'll give you an example of a few areas of investors we have that want apartment buildings. So doing an apartment building, let's call it 100 units. If you have a 100-unit apartment building, that's something that some investors like, which is okay, and there's money involved with multiple apartment building units. However, if you think of every single individual tenant that's in those units, if they don't pay on time, if they damage the unit, there's a lot of headaches that can happen. What I would do is typically introduce that apartment buyer to what I'm mentioning to you now, which is going to be different asset classes, such as a motel. A motel has, let's say, 100 different rooms. That runs under a different tenant landlord law, which allows you to have one manager on site. You control all the units, and if someone doesn't pay, you replace that money with deposit money. They really can't, damage the unit because of the timing in which they need to get out versus a 60-day eviction on the residential type of unit that would be there. That's time off money offline, and that's the property being damaged. So by doing a motel deal, just in comparison, that's one way to have, believe it or not, less headache and control of the property to scale yourself, so that now you can replace that money with income. You replace that money with a new guest, and there really is minimal damage. So that's one example. The other example that I like, and I've sold a lot of them, which I recommend for a lot of first-time commercial real estate investors, is self-storage. Self-storage facilities, think of those as 100 different units, but have no plumbing, no electrical inside, no toilets, one manager on site that collects the money and also handles any kind of logistics, including repairs on the site. So that's another way to control multiple keys or multiple units in a way that you don't have as much chaos. So you're essentially keeping life easier, making as much cash flow as you want to, but with no toilets, again, no electrical, no plumbing, but you're controlling 100 different keys that pay you every single month. And then remember, you're getting cash flow in commercial real estate, and then you're also getting the upside, which is appreciation in the event you ever want to sell it in the future, cash out, refinance that asset in the future, or do something else with regards to redeveloping the site. So those would be the differences on scalability, residential versus commercial real estate. I call it the bipolar business. And the reason for that is because you're on top of the world and then the deal falls apart and it drops and then you're back up and you're down, and things can happen like that in commercial real estate. The time frame from the beginning of a transaction until you're paid can be longer than most people are able to stomach. So you have to have really tough financial thick skin, and you have to be able to have a lot of tenacity and persistence, because it's not all roses. You'll have something that you're just about ready to close, and then a buyer discovers something or says, you know what, I don't want the deal. And you've gone, 30 or 60 days during due diligence to find out whatever the buyer decides to cancel on. So I call it bipolar business, and there's ways to combat that. So one way is do what I call the rule of 10. Rule of 10 is what I call it. What that means is have 10 things going on, 10 deals at the same time, maybe 3 lease deals, 2 new sales, another 2 deals coming in. If you have 10 going on and 1 or 2, even 3 drop, you're still okay because you have the others that are behind you to close. So that rule of 10 really helps. The other kind of negative or downside of commercial real estate would be that your point of entry is more expensive, right? So you typically are doing a deal between $1 million up to $10 million. So that down payment to get a mortgage for the property is much higher than it would be if you're buying a residential property. If you do it the right way, though, and you creatively structure the deal, believe it or not, it's easier to raise $2 million for a transaction in commercial real estate than it is for a $400,000 house in residential real estate. And the reason for that is because typically the lender for a commercial real estate deal will underwrite it and give you the funding based on the performance of the deal, how seasoned you are to create value. What's your plan? What's your exit to stabilize the asset, bring the rents up, really show the opportunity, and they'll lend on it in that way. You can do a lot of creative things in commercial where you can, structure the owner to hold financing, put a second mortgage on it where a seller holds a second mortgage on a property. And in regular residential, it's not the same. So there is risk. It's really more of having the endurance to get through the business and the deals that fall apart that maybe you were counting on. But there's ways to combat that risk in commercial real estate. So there's an identity shift between residential investors and commercial investors. And what that really comes down to is almost the mindset of where is each one of those types of investors. I personally started when I was a kid as the residential side. I was 21 years old, and I understood that buying a house in distress, foreclosed property at a steep discount would allow me to make enough profit that the business would be successful and that I would keep making money and do the next deal and keep, scaling. So on the residential side, that's good, but the problem is you're capped out at a maximized one property. You really only have the ability to flip it, or if you hold on to it, it's to rent it. And your appreciation only comes from a cost per square foot basis in the world of residential real estate. The other is that the rents in residential real estate are typically lower. And so, therefore, those two pots are really the only areas that you can make money on residential real estate. When you're on the commercial side, you have so much more of a flow of mixture of tenants, where cash flow can come from, how you can restabilize a property and take it from a vacant building to putting, a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks into it, capturing the cash flow, selling that out to an institutional buyer on a cap rate. And, a cap rate is something that determines the price in commercial real estate. So, for example, a Dunkin' Donuts or a national tenant at McDonald's will sell from a 4 to 5% cap rate. So, by doing that, you're selling a new investment that you bought and created value from scratch to someone who's willing to pay you and take a very small return, but that maximizes the amount of profit you're going to make on that deal. You can also do it in the different type of tenant mix. You may want to do all medical tenants or all retail tenants, and you have a diversity of stabilized income from either nationals or local regional type tenants that are giving you multiple cash flow sources from one building that maybe has 10 tenants. Now you have 10 streams of income with that one roof that it's under. Residential, it's one roof, one tenant, one money, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong there. So when you contrast the two, the identity shift is really residential would be a smaller investor that really is capped out on opportunity. Commercial is endless opportunity, bigger thinking, and really taking the ability to make money to a whole different level in many more creative ways than you ever could do on residential real estate. So that would be the differences between the shift between the two. So you have the knowledge, you have the basic information so far. Now the choice is up to you. I call in life the people who are champions, the one that take the 1%, which is the ability to take action on what they've learned to now turn it into a deal. Move forward with that education that you may need. And now you've got 99% of the information you need, but that 1% really is what turns you into a champion. It gives you the fundamentals and the wisdom and the knowledge that you need to succeed. And that goes for any different business that you're into or any school. Why does someone go to Harvard and pay $450,000 to go to that school? Is it to sit in a room and pay for it? No, it's for the knowledge that those people are going to learn when they go to Harvard and try to make themselves money in the future for their career. So with that said, if you want to get serious about commercial real estate, go ahead and click the link. And what you can do is be one of the first to get involved into the educational program that we have. We're going to do it where it's free, but it's going to be done in a way where only those that are committed to the business and want to make money, want to set themselves free from the JOB, which JOB stands for just over broke. If you have a job, you're restricted on the time that you're selling every day in terms of dollars for time. Imagine if you could take a vacation for a month and you don't have to answer to anybody. When you can do what you want, when you want, with who you want, then you've made it in life. Because essentially, when we're doing this business, we're buying ourselves freedom and doing that through wealth. It's not easy, and I'm not going to say anything of this is a piece of cake, but I will give you the tips, the secrets, and the tips of doing this business for a very long time so you can fast track yourself to success.